Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Tranchen, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of March for Science. I am here today with my good friend, colleague, compatriot, Hita Lakani, the Global South focal point for YUNO. Hita, how are you?
Doing great, Matt. How are you today?
I'm well. I'm well. I know we're both pretty honored that we had an opportunity to participate in this forum today. Special thanks to Earth Day Initiative and March for Science New York City for hosting this forum. Really excited to be a part of the official Earth Week kickoff in 2021. But Hita, I'd love for people tuning in to learn more about YUNO. YUNO, of course, is the official youth constituency of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That's a mouthful, the UNFCCC. But can you talk to viewers about what it is and how YUNO fits into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, Yango is the official youth constituency of the UNFCCC. What that means is that we're the official space for youth. If they want to input their voices into the UN processes, into the UNFCCC negotiations, it has to come through the official youth constituency. So, either you can be part of the national delegation and come as a party or as a country delegation, or you come through one of the civil society constituencies. And for youth, this one is called Yango. And we're open to anyone under the age of 35.
And some people might not be as familiar with the UNFCCC, but might be more familiar with the COPs, the annual United Nations climate change conferences that happen every year. Of course, COP21 being probably the most significant and famous, which was held the Paris Agreement. And COP26 is coming up this year. How do the COPs and the UNFCCC connect? How are they related?
So the COP is the annual conference of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The COP is short for Conference of Parties, like you said. And in the UNFCCC context, it's held every year. So it's usually held in the winters, about November, December every year. Of course, last year would ideally have been COP26, but it's been postponed because of the pandemic and would hopefully happen in November this year in Glasgow.
So being YUNO, and since the COP is the annual forum for the UNFCCC, YUNO is the vehicle for young people to participate in an official capacity within the COPs each year. Is that right?
Yes. So if you want to ensure that your voice is heard in the UN process, whether it is through an intervention, whether it is through statements, submissions, etc., it has to come through one of the official constituencies or the official mechanism which exists in the UNFCCC. So for a young person, it has to come through the youth constituency, which is young.
And so you're the global South focal point. What is that? Can you talk about the leadership structure of YUNO, which I know is itself not an organization. It is it's an official part of the architecture of the UNFCCC and its process. So how does one become a global focal point, and what are those responsibilities?
Absolutely. So YUNO, I am the Global South focal point. Like you've mentioned, we have two focal points, one from the Global North, one from the Global South, to ensure that there's regional balance. My co-focal point is Marie-Claire Kraft from Switzerland. And the two of us were elected back in 2019 at COP25 in Madrid to be focal points. So now how this process takes place is that within YUNO every year at the COP, we have elections within our constituency. So it's our members that vote. People run for elections, and then, of course, like any other election, the result is declared. And we have two focal points. So one from the Global North, one from the Global South, elected every year, usually on a one-year mandate from one COP to the next. But of course, this time it's been an exceptional circumstance where we've been on a 2-year mandate, hopefully until COP26 this year.
And if COP26 keeps on being postponed and pushed back, you'll, of course, be stuck in this role in perpetuity, right? You can never leave this role and these responsibilities, right?
We'll have to find an agreement. I think we'll have to go back to nobody's actually thought about it because we don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
We will have to, as a constituency, take the decision on how that goes. So that's not something I can say at the moment.
but right now, I mean, it's planned for early November, right, in Glasgow.
Yes.
And so far, that's the plan. I have seen some reports about it potentially being pushed back into the spring, or it being more of a hybrid virtual in-person events than I think initially being planned. But it'll be interesting to follow along. And I know right before the COP officially commences, there's in fact a COI, a conference of youth. Can you talk about that event and how that forum helps inform the youth advocacy of YUNO?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Conference of Youth, or the COI, is sort of our annual gathering in Yango. So it is a conference that will, as the name says, Conference of Youth. So it's organized by youth for youth entirely, which makes it a very special case event. Very different than other youth conferences events which are organized by organizations or by governments, etc. This is an entirely youth-led and organized event for young people, focusing on climate change, especially with a focus on the climate change negotiations. Um, so the COI tentatively is set to take place in the end of October this year in Glasgow. Of course, we have to look at the pandemic and the situation before we 100% commit. But as of now, we're scheduled to take place end of October. It is a gathering of youth originally planned. This is going to be the 16th edition, so COI 16. When we started 16 years ago, this was, of course, a space for youth to come, meet, and prepare for the COPs. So while that is still an integral part of what we do, COI has also evolved from there. So it's a space for youth to come together, to network, to build connections, build synergies, meet other young people from across the world, and sort of build this community of climate change activists, people working in the field, whatever you want to call it. But basically, young people who are committed towards a better planet, towards making a change. And of course, at the end of it, we also have a lot of younger working groups which are present there. So we have working groups in different topics in Yangon. Some of them quite UNFCCC negotiation based, or quite thematic, like, for example, a working group on adaptation, mitigation, action for climate empowerment, finance, technology. But at the same time, we also have very cross-cutting working groups, like the working group on human rights, on gender, on indigenous peoples, on cities, renewable energy, etc. So all of these working groups have their meetings, they sit together, they plan, they think about what, they look at the negotiations and see how they want to input into it. So basically their plans, their structures, all of this is sort of a place where they come together and do all of that. Of course, all of this also happens throughout the year with working groups, but this is the last minute prep just before COP. And the special thing about COI is that we have an outcome document, so to say, which is generated by the youth from all the inputs that come in over the course of 3 or 4 days. And this outcome document is given to the COP president and the UNFCCC secretariat as an outcome of what youth would like to see by the end of the COP.
So that's a great segue. What youth would like to see. We of course have a partnership on the campaign Science Not Silence. This was really launched in response to the IPCC 1.5 degree report, which was released at the end of 2018. This was the report, for those tuning in, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is the official climate body of science within the United Nations. And its report basically demonstrated just how far off the mark we are from achieving 1.5 degrees, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. And it showed what the impacts would be around the world when we hit that mark. I know you, as a member of YUNO, were a part of some of those early negotiations when this report was brought up. Sadly, since it has been released, for the last 2 consecutive COPs, it has been blocked from being formally welcomed at the United Nations annual climate change conference at the COP. Can you talk about what that experience has been on a personal level, going through the international climate change negotiation process, and the importance of the Science Not Silence campaign as you see it?
Yeah, for me, I was, of course, like you said, I was part of the group at that point. We had a working group on the IPCC 1.5 degree special report. And some of us were following the negotiations. We were in the rooms when these negotiations were taking place. And of course, it was quite heated conversations. There was not, there was no consensus amongst the parties on how this report would be incorporated into the text. Some countries, of course, very aggressively blocking it. Some of them supporting it. So it was quite a tense situation, day after day as the negotiations progressed.
And Hita, countries wanting to block it, can you kind of walk someone through why in the world would a nation feel threatened by a climate science report that simply demonstrated the impacts on the world when this threshold is hit? What are they afraid of?
There are lots of implications, right? So every time so the negotiations are basically text. So it's a lot of text on the screen, and every single word, by the time it is finalized, every single word has to be agreed upon by everyone in the room. That's how the UN functions. It works on a consensus-based model of decision making, which is why it also makes the process really slow, because each country has its own agendas, its own ideas, problems, issues, solutions, which they all come with. And imagine sitting in a room with 10 people coming to a very simple decision, which all of us have to agree with, and then broadening that out to a global scale, having 197 countries present there trying to make this decision. So which already complicates the process that much. But especially in terms of the IPCC report, I think it just shows that we really, really need to cut back on emissions. And a lot of countries, a lot of their economy depends on fossil fuel. Whether you're an oil-producing nation or whether you're consuming, or a lot of your economy depends on that. So especially countries whose economy had to find an entire new model of survival, those were the countries that were blocking it mainly. And countries, especially like island states, developing nations, who would be facing the impacts of climate change, where the 1.5 and 2 degrees is a matter of survival for a lot of people across the world. Those countries were actually for accepting and welcoming the report into the draft text. So there's different points of view, both of them talking about survival, but different kinds of survival.
Right. Well, and I want to note that AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, the official body of island governments within the UN, of course, is our co-organizing partner on this campaign. So the Science Not Silence campaign, calling on governments around the world heading into COP26 to formally recognize and welcome the IPCC 1.5 degree reports to be brought in, and frankly used to inform climate change negotiations. I think we've seen recent reports about the country's NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, those pledges made during the Paris Agreement are woefully inadequate. And so I think as a world, as a climate movement, it's critical that we define success and use 1.5 as that line in the sand, that we need to do everything we can to keep it below. So at the moment, Hita, 15 governments have formally signed on to join the campaign. This Earth Day, we're of course going to be highlighting those governments and climate action, as well as highlighting YUNO members from across the globe that are a part of this movement to address the climate crisis. Something I've heard you often say is that in order to achieve success, it's not just governments, it's not just young people, it's not just the private sector, it's not just philanthropists. It's going to require all of us working together. And I'm so proud to be able to call YUNO our partner. It's exciting what we've accomplished so far, and I know we're just getting started. So as we head into Earth Day, I want to do a final call to action for any young people tuning in. Please join us on Earth Day. We'll be sharing content across March for Science's digital platforms, highlighting young people and providing opportunities to get involved, not just with your governments and not just with the international climate change negotiation process, but really within the youth climate movement as it's a part of the official architecture of the United Nations Convention for Climate Change. So Hita, again, absolute pleasure being with you. I guess I'll leave with this. What would you say to young people who are tuning in right now and not sure where to start when it comes to getting involved and making a difference in the climate movement?
Yeah, I think this is something a lot of us fight with, right? We see the problem, we just don't know where to begin with because, especially in terms of the climate crisis, it looks so huge. It can be quite daunting in that sense. And I think the best thing is to begin small, right? Begin wherever you are, whether you're in school, in university, you're working somewhere. Find the one thing that you can change, whether it's at home, and work towards making that one tiny step first. So, whether it's reducing the amount of plastic you consume, or maybe the food that you're eating, or maybe what mode of transport you're taking every day. Look at the simple things that you can do, and then look around. There are so many volunteer groups, there are youth groups across the world that are active on different focus areas. There's Yango, which is more generic, focusing on policy advocacy. But we also have working groups focusing on a lot of different topics. So that is one space that you can come to. But other than that, there's also amazing youth groups across the world, no matter where you're based.